Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Investor Lab. My name is Goose.
My name's Gabby.
Hey, Gabby. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Welcome back to part two.
Yay. What are we talking about today? Part two of what? Part two. What did I hear? Part two of what?
That's a good point. Part two of our two-part series on intelligent goal setting. So part one, we basically pulled apart trying to help you guys get some clarity on your goals. Setting goals, how to set the right goals, how to set big enough goals, how to even think about goals that actually matter to you. And so in this one, we've gotten much more tactical. We've gotten mechanical, and then we went a little bit woo-woo to try and like really embed these belief systems that these goals are actually kind of possible for you. But we go through an action plan through this, really breaking down your goals of like who you are, what you want to achieve in the next 20, 25 years, and reverse engineering that into a plan that you can really start working on today. So it's super helpful for if you've thought about goal setting before. It might be some of it might be familiar and might be super helpful to you to refresh. Or if you've never thought about goal setting and you kind of thought, well, this is not really for me. This is like not my cup of tea. It's still a really awesome thing to just give a bit of time and consideration for, because it's an awesome mindset to develop and really push through to help you actually achieve these things that you say you want to achieve. So
100%. 100%. Yeah. It's awesome. So, and if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, episode 1 in intelligent goal setting, building the vision of the future, then I highly recommend you go back and listen to that episode first, because that is what's going to set you up to be able to put an action plan into place in this episode. So without any further ado, let's get stuck right into it. I hope that this two-part series has been beneficial. I look forward to your feedback. Gabby, any final things before we jump into it?
Nope, let's go.
Let's go. All right, guys, we'll see you on the inside. Hey guys, welcome back to episode 2 of the Intelligent Goal Setting mini-series, two-part series. Gabby, how are you today?
Oh, I am still amazing. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. Very, very well. So in the last episode, we covered quite a lot of ground. It was quite esoteric, right? It was a little bit more high level. It was like, about identity and values and all this kind of stuff. We talked about the kind of 3 biggest problems that people have with goal setting. Number 1 is they don't set goals.
Yep.
Right. Number 2, they don't set them big enough.
Yep.
And number 3, they don't set the right goals, right? Which can be a little controversial as well. So, and we also kind of talked about like how to start thinking about that, how to start repositioning your mindset to identify the right goals for you and what kind of timeframes and stuff like that. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. So just coming into this episode, like this one is going to be super practical, and we're basically going to take your goals that we set in the last episode. So I'm hoping you're coming back into this episode with a list of all the things that you want to achieve in, over the next 20 years or whatever your time horizon is for yourself, both in all 6 areas of life that we kind of touched on. And not just what you want to achieve, but like who you want to be, what kind of experiences you want to have this big kind of bucket list. So then we can apply it to this episode, really start breaking that down and putting it into more of an actionable plan. So we can start thinking about, okay, what do I need to do today? Because I've got this now lofty goal, lofty vision for my life and who I want to be. And it all sounds nice, but like, what do I actually need to do today to start moving towards that? So if you don't have that done yet, go and do it now. Pause the episode. If you're driving the car, don't do that. Maybe do it later. But so we can start playing it apart.
Yeah, totally. So is what I think is really cool, right, is what we've done so far, and certainly what I hope that you, the listener, has done, is firstly we identified, where we wanted to get to. So there's, as I mentioned in the last episode, there's 3 parts to it: where you are now, where you want to be, and then how you're going to get there. So to your point, Gabby, if you haven't worked out where you want to be, I would really strongly advise you do this with your partner, significant other, or do it yourself if you're a solo traveler through life. That's fine, but take the time to do that, because you have to get crystal clear on where you want to go, because otherwise the directions won't make any sense.
No, they won't.
If you're trying to get from Sydney to Brisbane, but you've got the directions of Sydney to Perth, you're not going to end up where you want to go, right? You're just going to end up in the wrong spot. So clearly identifying Where you are now is one thing, right? And then where you want to be is the other thing. So then today's episode is how do we create the map? Like how do we make sure we get there, and how do we continue to make sure we stay on track? Because that's I think the other biggest problem is that when people do set goals, they then drift, right? So without a management system in place to be able to keep yourself on track, you're gonna run off track. It's really quite simple, So the easiest way to think about that is if you were let loose in a forest and somebody said, hey, your destination is directly north from here, and even if they pointed directly to north and said it's north, off you go. The likelihood is, and then they left you to it and they said, just go there and we'll see it's 10 kilometers north or whatever it is. The strong likelihood is that you're going to drift off track, right? There's a variety of reasons why you would do that. They're physiological reasons. Typically you've got one leg shorter than another. You've got terrain reasons. You're going to encounter some obstacles that you're going to have to try and go around, under, over, or through. You're going to potentially, turn yourself around and then lose orientation around what actually is north and how you. So there's all these reasons that you need to create an actual map, like a bit of a compass. It's going to say, okay, here I am, and these are the checkpoints that I'm going to have along the way, and here's how I'm going to know that I'm still on track. Like when I get to this point, and then this point, and then this point, and then how do I keep myself motivated to get there? Because anyone who's like New Year's resolutions are a classic one, right? Because people will set these kind of goals like, hey, I want to lose 10 kilos, which is great, which is an awesome goal, but there's not an actual plan to achieve that. And so that's the reason most people don't do it. They might even start trying to eat healthy for the first couple of weeks, so they might try and start exercising for the first couple of weeks, but because there's not a clear and measurable plan in order to achieve those goals, they typically end up drifting, and then before they know it, they're just eating chips and drinking Coke and sitting on the couch playing Xbox. So really identifying how to put that into action, I think, is actually, I don't know whether I'd say it's more important. What do you think, Gabby? Is it more important, or just as important, or slightly less important than having the right goals to start with?
Well, I think they're equally as important, because it's obviously like, and this is kind of where you hear like things about like law of attraction and just affirmations and stuff, just as a principle. And people hear that and think, okay, I just need to like wish my goals into existence, and I don't actually need to do anything, but it'll come to me. Eventually it'll happen. And there's an element of that, right, which we'll talk about later, which there's an element of truth in that, but you have to still take action, and you have to still be putting things into place to get you forward step by step to where you want to go. So they go hand in hand. Like you have to have this goal of where you're going, but then you need to have a plan and a roadmap, and then actually consistently take massive action along that path to get there. So equally as important.
100%. And I think even in the implementation of achieving that vision. So as you mentioned, so people should have arrived in this episode with the bucket list of all the things they want to achieve in life, and hopefully have created a bit of a vision for who they want to be, where they want to be, how they want to feel, who they want to be doing it with, all of that kind of stuff as part of that kind of longer term vision. The way to put it into action, though, is two parts. There's like a really mechanical part of it, and then there's a really kind of I'm just going to say woo-woo side of it, right? So, and the woo-woo side, non-mechanical, metaphysical. Go with metaphysical.
There you go.
And the metaphysical side of it, I think, is actually really, really, really important. So, should we dig into the mechanical side or the metaphysical side first?
Mechanical.
All right. Okay. Let's go. Okay. So here's the way to break it down. So if you've created this list of things, your bucket list of things you want to achieve in life, right? And more specifically, what I hope you've identified is what your destination looks like and over what period of time. Now, what you want to do is you actually want to then turn that into an actual plan, not a theoretical or hypothetical plan, not okay, in my head, I can kind of see all I need to do is X. What you need to do is you need to put pen to paper, either physically pen on physical paper or digitally or some other method. You need to create a sense of structure, and then each of those things need to have measurable, each of the things you want to achieve need to have measurable outcomes, and you need to be able to track how you're going to achieve them. So the easiest way to do this is to break it down into a 20-year life plan, right? So a 20-year life plan is a good framework to use. Now, if your goals need to be achieved over 10 years, you can still use exactly the same methodology that I'm going to be talking about here. So you can use this as a framework rather than a rule book, right? The idea, though, with a 20-year plan is that you can break that down systematically into 90-day chunks, and then those 90-day chunks, each 90 days is going to make up 1% of 20 years. Gabby, you had a confused look.
No, I did have a look. So we've got, I don't know if anyone's actually read your book yet. If you haven't, well, there should be a link in the show notes as well, so go and grab it because, I mean, I like you, so I'm a little bit biased, and I think it's a good read. And you say some nice things about me in there, so definitely go and read it. But in there as well, we talk about the 25 to 1 life plan, which is essentially like if you use 25 years as the top line of the vision. And kind of we use 25 years is like 25 years seems to be enough to have like a life purpose, right? If you've got this vision for your life, it's kind of like you would hope that if you have a plan, you can achieve that in 25 years. And then we break it down to 1% of 25 years is basically 90 days, which is 1 quarter. So it's kind of, when you go through the process that's in the book, it's 25 to 1.
I just realized why you had that funny look on your face. Just because I was saying 20-year life plan, wasn't it? Not 25.
I was like, the math doesn't quite work, but
the maths, and also I was saying, I was like, those maths doesn't stack up. What is going on here?
So 25 years, 20 years also works, right? And like you said, if you've got a 10-year horizon and that's what you want to achieve, then sweet, you can also work backwards from that. But 25 years, and that's just an interesting fact, is like 1% of 25 years is actually 90 days, which is 1 quarter, which is kind of why we like to do these kind of exercises once a quarter, because it's kind of 1% into this bigger life plan.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for getting that back on track. I don't know why I was saying so exactly. So you've got a 25 to 1 life plan, right? So it's basically how do you create a 25-year plan, bring it back all the way back down to 1 day? How do you create a 25-year plan based around one vision? That's why it's called a 25 to 1 life plan. So in that, what you want to do is you want to start by mapping out the end destination, right? So you don't start with what you need to do next. You need to start with where you're going to end up. So the easiest way to do that is to take that bucket list of things that you've identified. You're going to split that into a couple of different lists. You're going to have the things you want to achieve in 25 years in your destination. You're going to have the things you want to achieve in 10 years. You're going to have the things that you want to achieve in 5 years and things you want to achieve in 1 year. You're going to break those down. You're going to split them into different lists, right? So once you've split them into different lists, the 25-year stuff should be the vision of who you want to be, and then the other stuff should be milestones that you want to achieve along the way. And it's important to break those up because we're going to talk about how to join all those dots in a minute as well. Now, what you want to do go on.
Can I just add before? So when you're breaking that down, I think I just want to give it a bit more weight because you're quite visionary, Ghost, so you do this basically innately anyway, in terms of converting a vision into like a plan. But I think if you're thinking about like this 25-year vision for your life, you can think about all these things that are on your list that you want to achieve. And then if you break it down, if you kind of just rewind to like the 5 or 10-year mark, you need to think about like, what do I need to have achieved by then to mean that I'm on track to achieve my 25-year purpose in life? And so you can kind of think about it like if it's a character in a movie, like what would that character, if the character by the end of the movie has achieved all of these things on my bucket list by year 25, like at year 5, like what do they have to have done? Like what do they need to have achieved by that point to make sure that they're still on track to achieve the end point? And so I think that's a good way to think about it, because a lot of people, it's hard to think about that in yourself because you're like, oh, okay, well, I want like a yacht by 25 years. Like what do I need to have achieved by year 5? And it's sometimes harder to think about it as yourself, but if you think about it as another person, like what does that character need to have done by that point, by year 5, by year 10, and working backwards? So then you can take it, so you've gone, let's say, from 25 years to 5 years, and let's say I need to have replaced my income of $100,000 by year 5. Okay, so then that's the end point, and then you work back to like, okay, so what do I need to have achieved by year 1 to make sure that I'm on track to achieve that year 5 goal of replacing my $100,000 income. And you can reverse engineer it that way. And it's breaking each of those chunks into comparing it with just the next goal and think, what do I need to have achieved by that point to make sure I'm still on track for the next kind of milestone?
That's so good. That is so good. That's really good advice. Breaking it down, like thinking about it as somebody else, because I think that's the biggest problem with all of this kind of stuff is that people find it hard to have self-belief that they're going to be able to achieve that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
almost pretending like it's a movie, like if this character wanted to achieve, if creating that identity and that persona and that future, and then if that character was in a movie, what are the things that they would need to do? If this was a game, for example, if I was
Yeah.
if this was Grand Theft Auto, not saying everyone's a living life, but like,
Crash Bandicoot.
right, if this was Crash Bandicoot, right, and you wanted to get to level 10, what would the other levels need to look like? What treasures would you need to unlock? What goals would you need to achieve along the way in order to get to the next piece? And it's a really interesting way to think about it because it starts to gamify it, right? And I actually really like that personally for myself. And I think it's really good, Gabby, because you're right. Because I innately think like this, I sometimes think I maybe don't explain it very well. So keep getting that out is really, really good. But gamifying it is kind of the whole point, right? So when you create a 25-year vision, it's far away. Like it's really far away. And it should be massive. Like it should be massive. It should be so big that you're just like, how the fuck am I going to achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And you may actually not believe it. Like, and this is the thing. You may actually not believe it. You might be like, what? I could never own a waterfront mansion in Vaucluse, right? This is crazy, right? But then the point is you then want to systematically reverse engineer that, right? So if I wanted to, and look, and I'm just I use these examples like things like yacht because they're just an easy thing to grab. And I'm not suggesting that everyone should have a goal of having a boat or anything like that. But let's just say that it was like, I want to have a mansion in Vaucluse and a yacht, right? Well, and let's say I want that in 25 years. Well, at the 10-year mark, what is it that I would have needed to achieve in order to be able to achieve that by 25 years? And then if I break that down to 5 years, what would I need to have achieved at the 5-year mark in order to be able to achieve my 10-year mark in order to achieve my 25-year? And then you reverse that back down to 1 year and then down to 90 days, right? So it's about systematically reverse engineering it. And this is why we call it a 25 to 1, because you get 25 all the way back to 1. Now, all of these things, and just to break that down, if you're going to do it on a 25 to 1 time scale, or I typically recommend using these breakdowns. So it's 25, 10, 5, 1, and 90 days, right? So 25 years is your vision, and 10 years is your mission, and 5 years is your goal, and 1 year is your target, and 90 days is your objectives, right? And you can kind of break it down into those simple kind of stepping stones, because what you might actually find is that all you need to do to achieve, mansion in Vaucluse and a big yacht is, in the next 90 days, all you may need to do is something that seems relatively inconsequential. But the power of compound interest doesn't just apply in things like, the financial markets and real estate and stuff like that. It actually applies in your activities in your daily life. So it's super important. But the thing is as well, we're not just talking again about financial goals. It's not just about like mansion and yacht. It's also things like health, happiness, and everything like that. So if your 25-year vision for your life is, I want to have a relationship with my partner that, we celebrate our love for each other every day. We're enriched by the time we spend together. We do daily activities together. And I feel like I'm more in love every single day, right? Awesome. Fantastic, right? Then you've got to be thinking, well, what would I need to do? Like, how would I need to be setting myself up to be able to achieve that? Like, what things do I need to do to make sure that I can achieve that goal? And it could be breaking it down into, in order for us to feel that way in 25 years, what's likely going to need to happen is we're going to need to feel like we have continuously gone on a journey together and achieved goals together and had a shared experience along the way. Because you could get 25 years down the road, and if you haven't had a really shared experience, you might still be together, but there might be a big gap in between, like in your. And I think we've all seen older couples where there's a big gap, right? Like they've grown separately, right? So how do you avoid that? Well, the way that you could avoid that would be to make sure you have a load of shared experiences. So perhaps, if the 25-year goal is to have this beautiful, amazing, enriched, loving relationship, perhaps at 10 years, maybe what you want to have achieved is you want to have maybe, just using what I mentioned earlier about like the Annapurna circuit, maybe is like we want to have, trek the Annapurna Trail. We want to have mountain biked through the snowy mountains, and we want to have dined at 5 of the world's 50 best restaurants together. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm just using those examples as broad examples, but you might want to break that down, because and then you can kind of go, okay, cool. Okay, great. Well, they're still pretty big goals, right? Like 5 of the world's 50 best restaurants are going to have to travel all over the world for that. And, like tracking the Annapurna circuit, that takes about a month, right? So what am I going to need to do? What am I going to need to do between now and then in order to be able to achieve those goals? Okay, well, I'm going to need to get myself into a position where I can take a month off work to do the Annapurna circuit, and I'm also going to need to get fit enough to do it. So when am I going to do it? Is that going to be in the next couple of years, or so you go back to your 5-year goals, right? And then you start going, okay, well, what am I going to need to achieve in order to be able to achieve those 10-year goals? Do I need to have achieved a certain amount of savings by the 5-year mark? If by the 10-year mark we want to have dined at, did I say 5 at the 50 or 10 of the 50? Five of the world's 50 best restaurants. Then you maybe by year 5 want to have dined at 2. Right, so maybe have dined at 2 of the world's 50 best restaurants, and that leaves you 3 to tackle over between years 5 and 10. So, and then maybe you want to have achieved the mountain biking through the snowy mountains, but perhaps you haven't been on the Annapurna trek yet. But maybe you've achieved some smaller milestones of treks that you want to do in order to get fit enough to achieve that goal. So maybe you will have done some smaller ones, like, I don't know, trekked around Wilson's Promontory in Victoria and done these kind of like stepping stone events to get there. And then you might go back down to 1 year and say, in my 1-year goal, in order to achieve the 10-year goal of, dining at 5 of the world's 50 best restaurants and trekking the Annapurna circuit and doing all this kind of stuff, maybe I'm going to find one Australian restaurant that is in the world's 50 best restaurants. And in the next 12 months, we're going to make it a goal to get to that restaurant. That's going to be the first one of our 5, right? So that way it gives you something to pull you forward. And you might say, I am nowhere near fit enough to do a multi-day trek. So what I'm going to do this year is I am going to do my first 2-day trek, and I'm going to do that in the third quarter of this year. And so therefore I'm going to start getting fit now, and I'm going to start doing some, you can start to break that down. I'm going to do my first overnight trek in the first year. And you can start to then systematically break that down. And then you go, okay, well, great. So in order to do my first overnight trek, let's say I'm going to do it in 6 months' time from now, what do I need to start doing today in order to do my first overnight trek? Well, and also, what do I need to do to be able to afford to travel and dine at one Australian restaurant that's in the world's 50 best? Well, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to probably need to have a little savings plan, because it's probably going to cost a little bit of money to travel and accommodation, and I don't know where the restaurant will be, and how much is the restaurant going to cost, and it could just be like $50 a week. I don't know, right? Whatever you're going to need to save for that, so you can then start thinking practically. I'm going to create a world's 50 best restaurants fund, right? So you can start a savings plan. And then you could also say, well, in order to start going on an overnight trek, I'm going to need to start by getting some hiking boots, and I'm going to need to start by going on a couple of 1-day treks. So in the next 90 days, I'm going to do 3 1-day treks. And in the 90 days after that, I'm going to do, a couple of longer treks. You start to break that down into systematic steps. I know I've kind of waffled a fair bit there, Gabby, but do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, it's really awesome, because you can tell like your mind just thinks about this constantly, and you're constantly kind of reverse engineering where you want to be to like, okay, what action do I need to put in place now? And so for someone like myself, I'm not quite as visionary as you are. Like, I can think that way, but it's harder for me to really hang on to that vision in the day-to-day. And I think breaking it down and getting real clarity on this whole like vision and the funnel back down to like my actions today is really important, because you can boil that down, right? And so you get to um I've determined that for me to have this amazing relationship with my partner where we've had shared experiences together, what I need to do today is go on a walk every day, right? That's ultimately what you've gotten to. But if you don't have that connection, if you've just set yourself like a goal for like, I'm going to go on a walk every day, you immediately lose sight of like why that is important, because you're
Yeah.
just like, I can't be bothered. There's too much other shit going on. I just not like, I don't have time. I'm not going to do that. And then gradually every single day you have that same conversation where you're like with yourself, where if you've lost sight of why you're doing it, you just don't do it. And that's when you veer off track from your goals. So ultimately, in that scenario, if you consistently day in, day out, make a decision to not do that, go walk in that direction, you are choosing to not stick to your vision of, I want an amazing relationship with my partner in 25 years where we've had amazing shared experiences, and just remembering to connect those two in everyday moments. And I think it's a really interesting assessment just about like your values as a whole. Like even if you think about in that 25-year vision, let's say like social, if we take the social aspect of like the six pillars, it's like if in your vision you are surrounded by friends, you have a really healthy social life, you spend a lot of time with others and connecting and giving back and sharing in that kind of way. If that's part of your vision, it's a really interesting assessment on your values, because you can actually assess like where are you at now, and you kind of need to make sure that you're putting in effort into those areas. Like you can't really, and this is what tends to happen with a lot of like financial goals or career-based goals. It's kind of you focus on that area and you think, well, I'll put in effort now and then the others will come later. And so it's the same with like family, it's the same with relationships. It's all of those kind of softer areas where, look, I'll push into my career or my finances or my business right now. And then the other stuff will come, when I'm happy or when I've got time or something. But ultimately, it's never guaranteed that that is also going to be there when you've reached this goal of financial freedom or whatever it is. If at the end goal you can see that you are surrounded by people that you love, then you need to make sure that you're putting in effort in those areas throughout each of those steps along the way. So,
yeah, and I think the other important thing about this is that it's measurable. Like, it's all well and good to kind of break it down, and you're right. Like connecting, I want to have a better relationship with. Well, I need to start going for a walk every day for the next 90 days. It seems like those connections are pretty sinewy, pretty stretched, but in actuality, they're very tightly connected. So identifying that connection is really, really important, but then also measuring it, right? So the point of breaking it down, 25, 10, 5, 1, 90, is so that you can measure it. So you can get to the end of 90 days and go, okay, so did I go for a walk every day? Like, what actions have I taken to move me towards my 1-year goals and subsequently my 5-year goals and subsequently my 10-year goals and subsequently my 25-year goal of happiness with my partner? And have I done that? And that's what makes it a little bit more measurable, a little bit easier, because a lot of the times when we set these big goals, they're ambiguous and off in the distance. I want this better life, right? Whatever it may be. And we kind of talked about that in the last episode, like how to break that down and make it a little bit more granular rather than just financial freedom, right? But the problem is that it's usually off in the distance. It's not something you're going to achieve quickly. And the problem with that is that when it's off in the distance, you lose your ability to stay on course. You lose your ability to stay on track and to measure that. So by breaking it down into systematic steps that allow you to see what you need to do today, then it's so much easier. So for example, like if you use the power of compound interest, if you improve by just 3%, or sorry, just by 5%,
it's got the calculator out.
I've got the calculator out, right? So if you improve by 5% every month, right, for 12 months, you will have improved by 80%, right? So 5 times 12 is 60, but in fact, 5% times compounding over 12 is 80, right? So you can achieve a huge order of magnitude of change. And if you do that again by another 12 months, it actually ends up being, you've actually moved 300%. So you can actually 3x whatever your current standards are by doing a 5% monthly incremental change in what you're currently doing. So breaking it down into these little steps and making it super measurable is critically important. A lot of people think that they need to go from 0 to 100 in 12 months, where in actuality, if they go from zero to 3, and then three, compounded 3% interest, 3% of improvement every single month for the next few months, they'll be where they want to be in like 18 months. And so breaking it down, I think, is critically important. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we need to talk about, though, because I think we've covered that a fair bit, right? So the other thing I think we need to talk about is how to maintain belief, right? How to maintain a vision, because breaking it down into steps is good, right? But how do you continuously stay compelled by that vision? Because maintaining the vision is really hard. Like, it's actually really hard. Like, I don't walk around every day just living in some vision of the future. It's a practice, right? It's a practice like going to the gym. It's a practice like anything. And I think that creating a systematic practice to pull you towards your destination is just as important as going to work, going to the gym, eating well, all of that kind of stuff. And this is where it gets a little bit more woo-woo, because what we're talking about now is like, vision boards and affirmations and stuff like that. Now, in the kind of like law of attraction aspect of it, it is actually, relatively scientifically proven that we live basically in a cosmic soup of energy, right? We're all just atoms and frequency and energy and all of this kind of swirling mass of nothingness and something all at the same time. And the only thing that defines the parameters of ourselves and the world around us is our perception of the frequency and of the energy around us, right? And so it's very practical that you can shape what that looks like and shape how that is, right? Which is the premise of the law of attraction. Like, if you can, create the right energetic resonance, then you can essentially create whatever you want. The problem is that's quite hard, right? Like, you can't just sit there and be like, I want a bike, and then you end up with a bike. Like, I think they use that example in The Secret, where some kid just wants a bike, and then lo and behold, he gets a bike at Christmas. Like, that doesn't quite. I don't believe that just like. Bada bing. However, what I would say is that the more that you can write down the things that you want, then you'll be very surprised at how often they come true. I actually remember when I was younger, I actually broke my back in a motorbike accident, and at that point in time, I was in bed, basically. I couldn't do anything. And so all I had to do was listen to music. And that was when I first started. The seed was planted for me to start my career in the music industry. And I had no idea. I'd never done anything in it before. But I remember writing down in a list the top 5 festivals in the world that I wanted to work at. And I had no idea what a festival even was. The only reason I knew, and this was like before the internet, I think, and the only reason I knew that these festivals existed is because I had CDs of bands that had recorded live tracks at these festivals. And I was like, yeah, cool, I want to work there. And so I actually wrote down a physical list. I don't know why I did it, but I wrote down a physical list of the 5 festivals I wanted to work at in the world. And it was really funny, because within 10 years, I had worked at every single one of them, and I only recognize that in retrospect. So it's pretty interesting when you can identify the things you want in life, and then you can start to live it and believe it. Those things really do start to happen. So some practical ways of applying that, because a lot of people think that just like the dream it, believe it, and it'll happen kind of approach is a little bit wishy-washy and a little bit esoteric. But I actually think there's wholly practical ways to apply that and make it come true. And I can categorically tell, I'll openly and flagrantly tell anyone who wants to listen that active affirmation, active visualization, active goal setting does get you what you want. Like, it does. It's a fact. It's a fact for me. And it's a fact for me because I've lived it. I've gone from basically, broke drug addict through to living an amazing life with you, Gabby, and having a cool business and achieving all the things that we like. Life is just fantastic. And that kind of thing doesn't just happen, like, unless you craft it. So some of the ways that I do that is I actually write out physically physically write out. So I understand, like I've kind of mapped out all this stuff, like what are all the things in my bucket list, and I actually physically write them down every single day, but there's a kind of key part to writing those down is that you have to always write them down in a present or past tense, and you've got to never use any negative words. So you might have a goal of I want to lose 10 kilos, right? However, if you write down, I don't want to be fat, or I want to lose 10 kilos, you actually are inviting kind of a more negative connotation into the things that you're actually then attracting the things you don't want, because the words that you use are the things that you attract. However, if you say something like, I weigh 80 kilograms, right? Let's just say you weigh 90 kilograms, right? I weigh 80 kilograms. Then that's actually a positive affirmation of the being that you want to be. So it's really important that when you're writing out your goals that you don't, and you're writing out affirmations, that you don't use negative words. Never say I don't want, or I want to lose, or I don't want to have. You've got to imply the things that you do want, which is actually quite challenging because you've got to think about like the craft, like how you're going to craft the sentences that you use. But yeah, I literally. Sorry, Gabby, go on.
I just want to add, I think that with all of that, like people totally underestimate the power of language. And it's the way that you converse with yourself. And ultimately it comes down to, again, it comes back to your identity piece. And it's like we have these experiences through our life that shape the way that we perceive the world and perceive ourselves and our place in the world, and who I am and how do I fit in amongst everyone around me. And so we've got these belief systems that we've picked up through our childhood, through our experiences, and we've kind of installed these beliefs in ourselves. And so they're really hard to reverse out of, and they can feel really uncomfortable as you're trying to write down these, affirmations or these goals for yourself about who I want to be, because they can feel really foreign. They can feel like I'm just making this up and it's not actually who I am. But if you've already gone through the process and you've identified like this is who I want to be in 25 years, then you kind of just need to keep brainwashing yourself to believe that that is possible for yourself, because it ultimately comes down to, and this is kind of where like all this law of attraction kind of stuff tends to fall down, is people forget that it's not just about saying it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. There's an element of repetition that helps with it, but it's like ultimately if you don't believe it, if you don't believe that it's possible for yourself, or you don't believe that you deserve what you're talking about, and that it's ultimately like this is already how it is, like I've already made a decision here for my life and what I want out of it, it's not actually going to change anything. If you're just writing things down every day where you're like, I'm the fittest I've ever been, but you can think in a day-to-day sense, if you actually don't believe that, it won't actually change anything. And so I think that's the hardest part, is actually acknowledging that you need to push through these beliefs that you have that you may not have ever confronted before. You may not have ever thought about these ways that I have a conversation with myself, that I actually don't like deserve the things that I want, that I don't have the time to like work on myself, and that actually my priorities can come later in life. And there's so much of these subconscious conversations that we have with ourselves every day that we don't even acknowledge. So I think this is kind of a really difficult thing, challenging thing to work through when you start doing this kind of stuff, is like so much is going to come up that's stopping you from believing that any of this will work. But you need to realign your belief systems essentially.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a really good point, right? Because you can write out, like I write out all of my goals every day, pretty much. In fact, I didn't do it for 2 weeks, but pretty much every day I write out those goals. The problem is you have to continuously brainwash yourself to believe them. So, for example, we want to grow Dashdot into a large company. Well, I've never done that before, and I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what that feels like. So, what I need to do actively is read about companies that are much bigger than ours. Like how many team members do they have? Like what does their corporate structure look like? How do they need to think about things like ESG? All of this kind of thing. And I have to then try and, because the only way that you can start to believe it is to actively brainwash yourself. So the books that I read, the media articles that I read, the conversations that I choose to have, the podcasts that I listen to, they're all actively me brainwashing myself. Like I talk about things like indoctrination and brainwashing quite a lot, particularly with our team. And it's super important because you are what you believe that you are, right? So in order to actually create that belief, you have to brainwash yourself. Like there is no single source of truth in this world. Like if you ask someone in, I don't know, you can think about loads of different scenarios where there have been dictators and stuff that have used a lot of propaganda to essentially brainwash a whole nation of people who believe that they're doing the right thing. I mean, like you need to think about, how do you achieve that? What kind of propaganda do I need to give? Like, how do I brainwash myself? Because the truth that I can believe is the truth that I will live, right? So if it all comes down to belief, which it does, right, then the single most important thing you can do is to make yourself believe. So how do you make yourself a believer? Well, you have to break through some really deeply programmed shit, right? You need to break through all of that kind of stuff, like maybe I'm not good with money, or I'll never have a six pack, or people don't, I don't deserve love, or I'll never amount to anything, and all of these kind of like really deeply seated beliefs that we have, right? Which is really full on, right? So, but the only way that you're going to overcome that is if you brainwash yourself, right? And you get to choose how you brainwash yourself. Like you could brainwash yourself by watching, tabloidal news every day and brainwash yourself into believing that the world is a really, really bad place. And you could brainwash yourself by only going in Facebook groups where people believe the earth is flat, right? And then you can find enough body of evidence to support that. I mean, to be quite honest, we've started a vegan diet. Now, not that long ago, we were on a keto diet. And when I started the keto diet, I brainwashed myself. I said, right, I want to find enough supporting evidence, right, that will allow me to believe that this is true, so that I just go into a full bore. And when we decided we wanted to give the vegan diet a go, it was like, okay, cool. Well, how are we going to brainwash ourselves? What stuff are we going to watch? And what stuff are we going to read? And what stuff are we going to listen to that is going to give us the belief to stick with this, so that we understand it and all of that kind of stuff. So creating those inputs is really, really, really important. And I think.
Yeah, I can add to that. It's actually something that's really interesting to just come up in my mind is about that the vegan aspect, right? Because the language I use with myself, I will never use the word diet. Like I will not, like I'm not thinking about like I'm on the vegan diet. I'm just like I want to eat plant-based for now. I don't know how long for. It's not for a particular goal personally. Just on my research, I feel like I want to try that and see how my body reacts. And I kind of just made a decision when I did that and I'm clocking that it was a decision where I went, this is going to be good for me. And so that has been my language with myself since we have started eating this way, is like, this is good for me. And that's genuinely what I believe. Whereas if I go into it thinking like, this is like, it's a diet, it's a fad, I'm just going to do it for a period of time and like see if it works out. Like, I don't know if it's going to work out. All of these language with yourself, it doesn't actually help change your belief system, which is ultimately going to dictate your actions and then your results. Whereas I can make a decision where I'm like, this is good for my body, which is genuinely what I believe now. And there's those kind of aspects in every area of your life where if you're trying something out, if you have a mentality of like, it might not work, it probably won't work, because you're already like planning an exit strategy and your mind is already feeling safe about like, if it doesn't work out, then at least I can say that I didn't know if it would work out. And there's that element of like survival where you're not going to get rejected because people thought you were wrong and you failed. Whereas it's much more risky to be like, I know this and this is known and this is what I believe now. But ultimately that's actually what's going to be more likely to help you succeed. Again, it comes back to like, if you actually want that. So for myself, I feel like I haven't been very healthy the last 12 months, as I'm sure a lot of people through this kind of period of the world feel a similar way. And so I just made a decision. I was like, no, I need to do something that I feel like is going to be healthy for my body. So I made that decision, and that's kind of how I feel about it. So I don't really think about vegan or plant-based now. I'm just like, this is kind of where I'm at, and it's good for me. So
Yeah, totally. Well, there's a saying that whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right, right? So, um, the only difference between we've talked about this on previous podcasts. The only difference between anyone and someone like Elon Musk is that he believes different things, right? He's not physically different. He may have, maybe a slightly higher IQ or something like that. Maybe not too. Like it's really comes down to belief. So one last thing that I wanted to talk about. I know this episode's running a little longer, but one last thing I wanted to talk about was vision boards, right? Because a lot of people really struggle. And I know that you have spoken to me about this multiple times. Like, how do you maintain vision, right? How do you actually do it? And a lot of people talk about affirmations. And it's like, well, the way that you do affirmations is that you write out sentences in a past or present tense that affirm the life that you want in the language that makes it that implies that it is the life that you currently have, so that you can start to brainwash yourself. That's the simplest way to think about it, right? Write out sentences that explain the life that you want in a way that it's framing it as a life that you currently have or you have already lived. It's the easiest way to think about it, and that's what's going to do that kind of stuff. So when it comes to vision boards, though, there's always a big question, like, what actually is a vision board? Like, how do you do it? Like, do you get like magazine clippings? Like, do you get a big cork board and stick it on the wall and like just cut out stuff out of magazines? Do you have to go buy magazines is it like a collage project? Like, how do you do it? Like, actually, how do you create a vision board? I think it's a really interesting question. A lot of people talk about vision boards like, yeah, just find pictures that pull you forward and make you feel the way that you want to feel about your life, and represent the things that you want to achieve and all of this kind of stuff, which is fine. Like that's totally fine. Maybe you want a Range Rover, so you can go get a picture of a Range Rover. Maybe you want a yacht, so you can go get a picture of the type of yacht you want. Maybe you want to travel to the Bahamas, so you can get a picture of an island in the Bahamas, right? And you can kind of get all that kind of stuff. But then what? Do you put it in a Google Doc? Do you print it out? Do you get murals painted about all that kind of stuff in the house? Like, what do you actually do? And so I wanted to share a little bit of a framework for how people can kind of build that out, if that's all right. Do you think we've got time for that, Gabby?
yeah, yep.
Awesome. So the easiest way that I have thought about doing this is to break it down. You can get an A4 sheet of paper, or you can do this online. So you can use something like Google Draw, or you can get a physical piece of paper or anything like that. I tend to use Google Draw because it's digital and I can find pictures from the internet, and it makes it super, super easy. But basically you get something that's about the same size as an A4 piece of paper landscape, and then you break it down into 5x4 squares, right? So you've got five squares across the top, 4 squares down the side, which gives you a total of 20 squares, right? And then in each of those 20 squares, you find an image of the thing that you want in life, whether it's trek the Annapurna circuit, so you might have mountains of Annapurna, whether it's pick another goal, whether it's a yacht, as I mentioned, whatever. And you find pictures that represent that, and then you put text over the top of each one of those things that explains what it is. It could be, I want to have X amount of dollars in the bank. So you might have a picture of money, but a picture of money in and of itself won't tell you anything, right? So you need to have visual and written cues for what those things mean and what they are. And the point is that by breaking it down into basically an A4 sheet that's got 20 pieces on it, it becomes almost like an advent calendar or a bingo or a bingo card, where you get to systematically tick off the things as you do them. So it almost gamifies it again. You then have in fact, I've got one right here. So if you can see the video of this, there's a sheet there that has all the kind of things broken down. And so then as you achieve those outcomes, you can kind of tick them off, and you can systematically work through breaking that down. And it creates a structure, and it creates a sense of something that you can achieve, and it creates and it gamifies it again, as I said.
I just want to elaborate on that a bit. So from my, I love that, but from my perspective, the only way for me to set goals and to actually work towards them is I need to really attach to the emotion that I will feel having achieved those things. And so if I have, you think about all these things, again, we'll take the yacht as an example. Instead of just finding a picture of a yacht that I would like, I always look for images of like a point of view photo of like a person on a yacht. Like their feet might be up on the edge of the boat, looking out over like the Amalfi Coast or something like that. I think that is on my most recent vision board. Or, if you want an amazing car, you might have a photo like from the driver's seat looking out over the wheel of like driving somewhere amazing, and having more of those experiential points of view in the images. For me personally, really helps to like get into that feeling, that experience of if it were true, and imagining like what it would feel like if it were true, because it's those emotions that are going to help form that belief system that already exists. And the other part to that is also, I tend to think about, to shape the vision board, I tend to think about like, okay, in this 25-year plan, what does a day in the life look like for me? Like, I've achieved everything I want to achieve. I'm this amazing superhuman version of myself. Like, I am like, could not imagine anything better for my life. What does that look like? Okay, I wake up in my bed. I look out over the ocean because I'm living on this beachfront house. I look out, there's open windows, there's like a cool breeze. I can get a bit of like sea breeze through, sea spray through the windows. It's like there's some like smooth jazz playing. I like wake up, I go and walk out onto the balcony. It's really quiet and calm. I go downstairs. Goose is there. We talk. We're laughing. Goose is there. Hello. There's all of these experiential things. And then I walk downstairs. I make something healthy to eat. We live in this big, like, amazing, beautiful home. We can walk out directly onto the sand. We walk out to the beach. Like, we're that close to the ocean. I can feel like the sand in my feet. Like, you come back, we have lunch. Like, we have this environment where then so for me, like, I've still got business goals and I still see that as part of the vision. And so we have people, like, we have our team around in our home. We're kind of standing around talking about the vision for the company. Like, Goose and I are talking about, we're doing some kind of presentation to the team, and then everyone's kind of socializing. So there's all of these like emotional feelings that I need to attach to that feeling of what does it feel like once I've achieved all of that. So that aside, for me to have achieved that, I probably need some kind of financial freedom, quote unquote, to have achieved that. But ultimately, these are the outcomes that I want. I want to feel these emotions, and that's what's going to pull me forward. So then I find images from that day in the life and put them on my vision board to help me guide me through that experience. And so this takes a lot of work, right? So this is a lot of going through this whole process and thinking about who I want to become and what does that person every day feel like, and being able to find images that actually bring up that emotion for you, and you can really feel like this has already happened and I'm so excited for it to be a part of my life. So that's kind of how I think about vision boards as well.
I think that's awesome. I think that's, yeah. Once again, you've taken something that I think about quite mechanically, and you've given a lot more depth and connection and everything like that. So I think that's awesome. So let's do a quick recap, because we've covered a lot of ground on this one, right?
Yeah.
So God, where did we start in this episode? So we started by talking about breaking it down. So 25-to-1 life plan. And we talked about how to do that and why, and how to connect your 25-year vision with the actions that you need to take today. And then we also talked about how to then put in a practice of affirmations, which, just to recap on that, I tend to do that first thing in the day, because that's when my brain is most malleable, and I choose to brainwash myself as early as possible so that every day I live that same belief. And then we talked about how to actually create vision boards and that are actually going to compel you to stick to that vision. So if we then tie all that all the way back, let's go all the way back to the start of the previous episode. So the function was that the problem that we were solving is that most people don't set goals, don't set big enough goals, and don't set goals, don't set big enough goals, and don't set the right goals. So then this is now basically how do we create the vision, and then how do we then bring that back and apply it in ways that are going to compellingly pull us forward. Do you think we've achieved that outcome?
I really hope so.
Well, I hope so too. So it's a big topic. It's a big topic, and it's quite tangential because we're talking about some quite esoteric things that we want to try and share with people to put into practice and to put in place. So if you have found this beneficial, please let us know, because I truly believe that the thing that's going to differentiate you achieving your goals and not is your ability to craft a compelling vision and then stick to that plan. So I hope that you get to put this into place, and I hope that this means something to you as well. I really enjoyed this. What about you, Gabby?
Yeah, I'd love to hear, like, if you're going through these exercises and you're actually having trouble, or you're not sure if, like, is this goal make sense? Am I doing this correctly? Please reach out, because we'd love to, like, we're here to serve you and to help you get clarity on all of this, because it's easy for us to just kind of chuck some strategies and ideas at you, but ultimately we're doing it because we want to help people push through this kind of stuff. So if you find that you're going through it and you feel like you're getting blocks, just send us an email. You can send us to hello@dashdot.com.au. One of us will respond. I would love to be able to help you, just get clarity on this and actually put this stuff into action. Because as we said, it's a balance of we need the vision, but we need to actually put it into action and make sure that we're going to stick to the plan. So, yeah.
100%. All right, guys. Well, on that note, if you have loved this, as Gabby says, give us some feedback. If you need help, give us some feedback. And if you know somebody else who would benefit from this, make sure you share that with them as well. And of course, like, rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye now.
Bye.